Joe Dante, great to see you again. You were a guest on the TCM cruise.
Had a great time.
You've been directing films since the late 1970s, mid-1970s,
Yeah.
right? Among them, Howling, Piranha, Inner Space, Gremlins, Gremlins 2. And Joe has this enthusiasm for film, film history. Where did that love of film begin?
I was a Saturday matinee kid. I went to the Saturday matinee in Livingston, New Jersey, where I could walk to the theater, and I became enamored of the 10 cartoons and the 2 features. And
10 cartoons?
10 cartoons. There were always 10 cartoons to get the kids in, and then they would run the 2 features, which, if it was an adult movie playing, they would book a Tarzan movie or a science fiction movie or something, and that would be for the kids. But if it was something that they thought was appropriate for kids, then they would run that too. And they would change on Wednesday, Sunday, and so Saturday and Sunday were different bills, and so I would go on Sunday too, instead of church. But for me, it was sort of like going to church, because when the lights go down and what am I going to see? How am I going to be transported? I don't think I thought that consciously as a kid, but later it dawned on me that this was really kind of my religion.
So, Joe, you've picked 2 movies. The first one is Night of the Hunter from 1955, the sole film directed by Charles Laughton, Robert Mitchum leading the cast. So pretend this is an NBA game and give people who don't know a 24-second or less setup for what this is, what the movie is.
It's based on a novel by Davis Grubb. It's a very dark movie about a fake preacher named Harry Powell, and he is in jail with Peter Graves, who has stolen some money and is going to be executed. And he manages to figure out a way to get the money. And of course, it involves his 2 children. And so Mitchum insinuates himself into
the lives of this family,
the lives
with the widow.
Shelley Winters, his widow.
So a lot of film lovers like this movie. As a director, is there something that, as people watch it, they should look for that maybe they wouldn't otherwise see?
Well, Charles Laughton was a very unusual director in that he had not made a film before. And his technique was very different than most directors. He would leave the camera on all the time. And it's an unusual way of making a picture. But then again, it's a very unusual picture. And in fact, except for the other picture I chose tonight, The Fool Killer, I would have said there was no movie like Night of the Hunter. But The Fool Killer is actually kind of like Night of the Hunter.
It is. Do you know any other directors who generally do that? I mean, especially, easier now, right? Because you're not wasting film, but
no, now filming was a very cumbersome process, because you had to reload and you had to do all the attendant stuff to work with film. But now with video, it would be very simple to just keep the video on all the time, and I think a lot of people do that. But in 1955, it was extremely unusual. And the crew, consisting of some terrific people, was totally behind it. They loved him, and they thought that he was a genius, and that they were making a great film.
Yeah, so Stanley Cortez, who shot the movie, the DP, and I'll paraphrase the quote, but basically said, I learned more about cinema from Charles Laughton than anybody else except maybe Orson Welles.
And Cortez has his own particular style, which is the same whether he's working on a big budget movie or some of the really lower budget pictures he did later, which involves shadow and light and taking light off of things. And also the production design of the movie is extremely theatrical. It's not a realistic looking movie, except when it goes outdoors. And then it's almost like you're watching a different movie. It's really stylized. And what's interesting for me was that I saw Night of the Hunter at a Saturday matinee when I was 9 years old.
Oh my God.
And
what time did this start, by the way? I'm just curious whether it was in the morning.
No, is it 1 o'clock in the afternoon is when
right.
they would run the pictures after the cartoons. 10 cartoons and Night of the Hunter.
10 cartoons to get you in the mood for Night of the Hunter.
There is a slightly cartoonish quality to some of the movie, and particularly Mitchum's performance. But all I can say is that for an audience of 9-year-olds or 10-year-olds or whoever our kids were, I've never seen them so rapt. And they were so terrified by this picture. People just remember it their whole lives.
All right, let's watch the movie, because there's much to discuss afterwards. Joe Dante, thanks very much. Here it is from 1955, directed by Charles Laughton, his only film as a director. Here are Robert Mitchum, Shelley Winters in Night of the Hunter. Back with director Joe Dante. Joe also created the website Trailers from Hell, which is a great resource for classic movie lovers, and also co-hosts the podcast The Movies That Made Me.
It's true, I do.
Okay, so what are we to make of the fact that Charles Laughton, great actor, Oscar winner for The Private Life of Henry VIII from 1933, never made another film? This experience turned him off.
This picture, which he had such hopes for, was not just a flop, it was a disastrous flop. It got terrible reviews, it made no money, and it crushed him. He had been planning on doing The Naked and the Dead next.
Oh, yeah.
And he was so disillusioned that nobody could see the merit in his work that he just said, okay, this is not something I'm going to do again, which I think is a loss for all of us. Once again, if you go back into the annals of criticism, there's a lot of situations where directors got so depressed by the bad reviews of the movies. Like David Lean didn't work for a couple of years after the bad reviews for Ryan's Daughter. And particularly a film as daring and unusual as Night of the Hunter, which I can understand that in 1955 it must have seemed rather bizarre, but it's obviously a work of art. And the fact that its creator was kept from giving us anything else, I think is really tragic.
Do you read reviews? Did you in the beginning?
I try not to because there was a review of The Burbs where Vincent Canby said that this movie is as empty as a movie can be without actually creating a vacuum.
It's a nice line.
Well, it is a nice line, and it struck me, because I used to be a critic too, and it struck me about how sometimes they just love the idea of being able to craft a great put-down as opposed to actually talking about the movie. And in this case, people just did not understand the movie. They didn't understand why he made it. They didn't understand that it was supposed to be scary and funny. They were offended that kids were in it. It was the wrong movie at the wrong time. It was a real bad break for him.
The Burbs is good, by the way. I mean,
it's not. It's no Night of the Hunter.
No, it's no. Oh, yeah, okay, it's not. But there's a lot of room between A Vacuum and Night of the Hunter for good movies, you know. So the use of shadow and light and the way the silhouette of Mitchum is seen throughout the movie, whether he's standing still or riding a horse or sitting on a stoop in the front yard, is that purely collaborative, or is it a DP like Stanley Cortez saying, I got an idea, and Laughton going along with it, or Laughton telling him, I want this?
Well, Laughton did a great deal of study of silent movies before he made this picture. And he sort of treated the movie as a silent movie. And the fact that Lillian Gish is in it obviously creates a connection there, although Laughton had actually asked Elsa Lanchester to play the part. Who was his wife.
Yeah.
And she said, no, you should get Lillian Gish, because you're watching all these silent movies.
We got to talk about Lillian Gish just for a sec, because she's so great in it. You don't know what to make of her at first, and then she just turns out to be so wonderfully caring. That is a real maternal figure that shows up in this movie and sort of saves, I suspect, kids, 9-year-olds watching this movie who were, desperate for something good to happen.
It helped us get through that Saturday matinee, that's for sure. She's wonderful in the movie and gives it a lot of heart. And also, which is helped also by the Walter Schumann's musical score, which is really moving. And there's some rather odd but beautiful songs in it. And it's a movie that I get choked up every time I watch it. I mean, it's a very emotional movie, especially for a picture that's so sort of off-putting in a lot of ways.
And in what amounts to a small part, but critically important, Shelley Winters also really delivers.
She does.
She's aching.
She's quivering with cleanness.
That's right. That's right. She's quivering with cleanness. Yeah. And then that's a little cartoonish too. I mean, just the manner in which she is killed is a little cartoonish.
Well, that's also one of the most stagey scenes.
Yeah, but it's very stagey.
Which is the Valse Trieste thing with the set that looks like a church and the deliberate movements in slow motion that were apparently choreographed to the music. There's just so much goodness in this movie that it's hard to imagine that people didn't see it.
Well, plenty of people see it now. It is sort of universally loved. And I will tell you that Joe Dante would not have picked this movie unless we could have secured the rights to the film that we are showing next.
This is true.
A movie that is clearly inspired by The Night of the Hunter. Stick around. Joe and I will return with The Fool Killer, starring Anthony Perkins, next on TCM.
Next on TCM, The Fool Killer, then Postmark for Danger, and later, Love in the Afternoon. It's always the right time for TCM.